Welcome everyone. It's 2:40, so thank you for being at this talk. Well, the first thing you notice is normally there's someone next to me. She doesn't want to be a super spreader today. She feels a bit ill, so she's at home, and so I will be giving the talk. So the first thing is there's some pieces of the talk that comes from her perspective, which I will now present. And I'll tell you when that happens, right? So that you're not maybe in a weird situation. Why is he telling that? Instead, that will be Evelyn usually telling that. So welcome. We're going to talk a bit today about how cognitive biases and ranking can foster an ineffective architecture and design. And I always like to tell a bit of a personal story. And this personal story was with my previous relationship. I'm happily married now, as you might see in my name. But before that, I had a really long relationship. And I'm a software engineer from background, actually an electrical engineer, if you go way back. And this was my problem-solving mechanism, probably familiar to you. And I also used this on my relationship, which wasn't a good thing to do. It was totally wrong of me. And what happened, it went wrong. And what did I do? I was looking at other couples. So how are the other couples doing this? Right? So we were in a tough situation, looking at other couples. They were happy, having this happy Christmas. Well, Christmas is coming up, right? And having gifts, exchanging gifts. Well, that didn't really work out, looking at other couples. Because in this situation, when things go bad in complexity, and a relationship is complex, right? And I'm telling you this from the Kinevin point of complexity. When things go bad, we need to endure, observe what we can shape, and probe. And we don't go chasing a happy path. And that's what I did, right? I was looking at others, instead of really talking what's going on and what can we change to do it better. Now, as I mentioned, I'm already happily married, and that goes way better now. So I've ditched the engineering approach to my relationship, and now starting to endure. But why am I telling you this? Is what do we see actually in the IT happening? And there's all these, well, microservices, Safe, Scrum, Kubernetes, whatever, Spotify model, right? And what I see happening in a lot of companies is it goes bad. They look at Spotify. Oh, they have a model, by the way. They once had that, one day maybe, and then it changed. But they were doing this, so maybe we should do this as well. But it's complex. An organization is complex. So just because other people are doing it doesn't mean it can work for you. And that's the basis of this talk. And actually, what you see happening is it's evolving, right? They're combining Safe and Spotify in their organizations. It's even worse. It can work. There can be parts of it that can work for you, but then just don't call it Safe or Spotify or whatever, right? And this is because organizations are complex, adaptive, social, technical systems. There are three aspects: social, technical, and a cognitive aspect. And we're going to talk a bit about that cognitive aspect and the social aspect as well. So there's three aspects that impact each other, and we need to keep these in balance, right? And we need to endure and watch. So what we usually do, and to give you an example, is, well, we're back. Some of us are back in the workplace again. Who's worked in an open office plan? Who likes to work in an open office plan? Yeah. There's a few, yeah, and it's okay. I sometimes do as well. But why are these organizations, they were doing the same, right? They saw it work for a company, the open plan, and there was promises, right? It's better for the communication, better for the collaboration. And there's this nice talk by Joe Wright from Lean Agile Scotland about the good, the bad, the open plan. And what you will see is that the original organization who invented the open plan, they designed it together. So they had one room, they had maybe a couple of teams, and they sat down with each other and collaboratively designed how they wanted to work and how they wanted to plan their open plan. And then, of course, companies came in and see, this really works really well. Let's do it ourselves, and then just implement it on themselves, and it didn't work. Because actually, when you see research, health goes down because people sitting more together. Social, and this is actually the worst, social safety went down. People were wearing headphones, so communication went down. What didn't went down? Anyone has a guess? No, it was cheaper. So that was the only benefit to an open plan, right? That was the only good thing about it. But it works, it can work, if you design and collaboratively design that together. And the thing is about these workspaces, you don't see it, you don't see the social part, you only see the technical part, right? Like this nice examples, right? If the technical part isn't aligned, you see it straight away, right? I actually think this one is intentional, right? College of Planning and Architectural, but you see it in the hardware world. But in the software world, you don't actually see it because it's soft, it's social. But if you design a monolith, for instance, or part of a software landscape without boundaries or the wrong boundaries, you just created an open office space for software teams. And that's what I usually also see, multiple teams working on software, but they don't really know where the boundaries is. It gets all noisy and chatty, and right? It's not because it's not collaboratively designed by the people who are working in it. And that's important, and this quote comes from, I'm not sure where the quote comes from, but I got it from Kathleen Henny. Habitability makes a place livable, and that's the same thing. If people work in the environment, let them participate in the design of that environment. That accounts for software, that accounts for where they work in, and you know what? If they design it together, there's no resistance anymore, because they designed it together, they were there, they can take responsible. And that's what we meant, and that's what Ruth Malan says, and I'm a big fan and a huge fan of Ruth Malan, right? That's architectural design. It's contextual, it's about boundaries, what's in, what's out, what spans in between. And we need to do that collaboratively, because if we don't, it will have a mismatch, which I'll show you later. And well, you know, people who know me, I'm from the domain-driven design community. That's actually in the bounded context. It's not a technical pattern, it's also a social pattern, because it's about language. And that's what sometimes we keep forgetting when we build software. That's also a social and a cognitive aspect. Yeah? And to give you another real-world example, this is the south of the Netherlands, Baarle-Nassau. What can go wrong with boundaries? Well, over at the left side, you see a Zeeman, right? There. Here's Belgium. Here's the Netherlands, and there's a boundary here. And this is what we call an organizational boundary. In this case, the organization are governments. And then Belgium went on lockdown. Really annoying when you needed baby clothes in Baarle-Nassau, because you couldn't reach it. Well, at least you could pay for something. And why do I show you this? Because there's a different aspect is when the architecture of the system and the architecture of the organization are at odds, the architecture of the organization wins. So, you know, Belgium won because they went on lockdown, and not the same one. Yeah, so this is important, and this is what usually goes wrong. We're not aware of these organizational boundaries, and this is not just a chart that's standing somewhere on the intranet. Maybe they put it there, but it's the communication. And this is actually Conway's law. For people who know Conway's law, it's about communication and collaboration more than real organizational boundaries. Yeah, and the only way to really work with that is to create a shared sense of reality. Right? We need to understand where are these boundaries, but these are soft boundaries, right? They're not hard boundaries, like the code I write, right? I have one repo, it's a nice hard boundary, but these are soft boundaries. So what should we do? And a really good practice coming from the domain-driven design community is that visual and collaborative modeling, right? It's a practice of using requirement analysis and modeling techniques to create a shared understanding. And the problem here is that if we don't have that shared understanding, people like me, who are technical people, will start talking about databases. And it's like, then there's domain expert, database, but that's not what I want. But this is about your business language, right? But it needs to be created collaboratively. I see people saying they're doing, for instance, domain-driven design, and they don't have a shared language with their business. For me, that's not domain-driven design. We need to do it together, right? Collaboratively, because then you create shared boundaries in reality. And for me, we should stop talking about technical architecture, but more about social technical architecture, which in my opinion is a role. It can be a function, but in essence it's a role, right? It can be anyone. Just like everyone should do testing, everyone should have these mindsets in them. And there can be a tester in your team. I definitely want you to have a tester in your team, but it's a role by default, right? But what happens when you put people together in a room? all these social and cognitive things start popping up, right? So how to make sure everyone said what has been said, right? So there's always people who are quiet. Recognize this? So there's always people speaking and sometimes some, right? I see nodding, yeah. So how can we create and include new insights? So we have all these insights now, but how can we gather them and make a decision as well, right? And who decides there on the architecture, and how to get everyone into the decision, and who to invite, and how to deal with issues that keep cycling back. Ever had that? You thought you made a decision, 5 minutes later, started challenging it again? Yeah. That's because there's a social thing going on there. Yeah. So that's what this talk will be about. How can we, as architects, everyone can be an architect or a designer, by the way, everyone should participate in it, battle these. Yeah? So that's what the talk mostly is about. And we're going to start with ensuring flow in meetings, how to make sure everyone said what has been said. So what we sometimes do, and we got this from Rebecca Weirs-Bross, and we like to do sense making in these sessions. And how does that work? This is a Miro example. We just put this on Miro, give people some dots, and ask how much were you able to contribute? And because they're anonymous, we can now see what's happening. Did you feel part of the discussion? That's an interesting one, right? There's people on the right, and there's people on the left. Now we can have a conversation about it. So why didn't you feel part of it? What happened? And these sense makings we do continuously, right? We're checking and sense making, how is it going? And that's really important and a really nice technique to do. So, yeah. And what is happening here, and this is just if you do this in a lot of teams, this always pops up. And that's what we call, and that happens because we're dealing with social ranking. Who knows about social ranking? Yes, so I see a few of you. Social ranking, and by the way, I'm switching now to Evelyn, because this is her part that she usually tells. So just so you know, this is part of what Evelyn tells. Social ranking is how do we place each other compared to the other? Do we place them higher or lower? In the end, we're social beings. We need ranking. It's completely normal that you rank yourself to another, and it happens also unconsciously, right? And there can only be one person on the top. It's normal, we need it because we don't like chaos. That's why we create culture, that's why we create ranking. Yeah, so we rank each other compared to another. And there's two types of ranking. The one is the explicit ranking, right? I'm a software architect and I have a manager. Well, that manager is in a higher ranking, right? Because they decide how much I get paid, right? So that's the explicit ranking. It's the charts that we all know. The thing that we don't know is the implicit ranking. And that's about gender, skin color, level of charisma, introvert, extrovert, level of informal power you have, etc., etc. And this has everything to do with symbolic power. This has everything to do with yourself, how you rank compared to others, how you see yourself compared to others. Yeah? And as you can see, there's a thing here. Once upon a time, there were a tall white guy and a woman in IT. That's me and Evelyn. And this is her. So this is her story, right? So we do these collaborative modeling sessions together. And what we see here is a pattern starting to emerge, which is about ranking. So we come in, we either C starts or I start, but what always happens is that if C explains something, her background, by the way, is social scientist. See this? She's a social scientist, but then she explains, for instance, ranking, and then I get the question. Weird, right? So why, if she explains something, I get the question? And there's many of these stories when you just scroll to Twitter one day and you see all these questions about all these things about ranking, right? So here's a few of them. Never, ever, ever, ever wake up to two women at a booth and open a conversation with, so HR or recruiting. This happens, really. I don't know, I don't experience these things because I'm higher in ranking. But just because I don't experience them doesn't mean they are not there. Yeah, it happens. And it's nice to be aware of it. So there's a few more of these examples that Evelyn can tell you. She was once in a session with a lot of guys, managers, and she's the one who needed to put the notes down. Oh, nice that marketing is here as well. Now the thing is, yes, I hear it, yes, that's already bad, but what happens now is something called symbolic violence. That person who's lower in ranking starts believing it. Yeah? So that person starts believing they're lower in ranking. And what happens then is okay, I'll just keep my mouth shut. I am lower than these people. That's what we call symbolic violence. Yeah? So you start doing it to yourself. And this is an important thing to keep in mind. They're doing it, everyone does it to themselves. That's one perspective, by the way. I'm going to tell you the other perspective because that's too easy, right, for the people in the higher ranking. But let's talk about that a bit later. So Romeo Mora said, right, a pair programming or mob session where one of the participants is hitting oneself, symbolic violence, is not a co-creation, it's a submission. So even though you, maybe in higher ranking, think we're equal, you don't know if the other person is hitting themselves. Because they might be a junior, or they might feel lesser than you, or they might feel... And that's what, again, doing to themselves. So open up that conversation. I'm going to tell you about what we can do about that a bit later. But be aware of this. And open up that conversation. Because you're losing information here. Yeah? That person is not speaking up, because they're doing it to themselves. Now, how can we deal with the impact of ranking, or how can we open the conversation up? We like to play a game of turn it around. We actually have this shirt. I have a male architect, and Evelyn has an architect shirt. It's weird. Who finds it weird, these shirts? Male engineer. It's weird, right? Yes, it is. But that's so ingrained. So whenever that happens, whenever you see something weird, think about it. You will never see male CEO, this company got a male CEO. You'll see female CEO or someone from college. So, be aware of it, that it happens. And when you see something weird, think about it. Is there something at play here? Is there ranking at play? And what we do is, in teams, we give people questions, like 13 questions that has to do with ranking. And people rank themselves, and then we put them in a line. So someone who ranks them low is here, someone who's high is there. Great. Now we make it visible, and now we let them talk to each other. So at least now we're aware how people rank themselves, right? Again, it's what you do to themselves. Now, as I already mentioned, so what? I'm higher in ranking. Again, it's really nice today. Evelyn is not here, so I can talk more than her today. She will love that joke, by the way. So what? Why should I care? I'm higher in ranking. It's nice, right? The thing is, I'm not always the highest in ranking. I once, as an ITer, you're usually lower in ranking than the business, right? Or lower in ranking of this ivory tower architects or people making decisions. And what happened one day is I was in a company and they decided you're going to use this agent for Jenkins. I don't know. You're going to use only this. And we were like, yeah, but we need to test on iOS, and that cannot work with that. Yeah, doesn't matter, you need to do. So what happens when you do that, what happens when you play your rank, because that's what happens here, is things like shadow IT works, right? So whoever bought a computer at their company, put on a build server on it, let it run something outside of what's already capable. I've seen it a lot of time. Yes, that's because someone played their rank, and you start to sabotage. And this is what happens when people don't feel heard. The sabotage line starts to work. So it starts with a bit of joking here, right? And again, joking is not bad. These are all normal. Again, they're completely normal. Everyone does. So start with jokes. Then some sarcastic jokes, and it begins to wrap around the same conversation, right? So there's a company takeover. There will be some sarcastic jokes being heard, because these people think, they didn't ask me. At some point, the excuses pop up. There will be gossiping. poor stop communication, slowing down, disruption, I like disruption, I'm going to ask the question again, I'm going to go deeper on the question, lies, right, disrupt, because they're not hearing me. Well, you see it happening now with Corona, right, strike and separation. This is what happens when people don't feel heard on the topic. So the shadow IT, well, you know, it's poor stopped communication, disruption, it's and it goes from left to right. And at some point, someone will leave, or there's a war, or there's a separation. Who recognizes any of these behavior? We all do it, by the way. It's completely normal. I have my favorite ones here. But what is it here is that every autocratic decision suppresses knowledge and wisdom and creates resistance. Every. This is just a rule. This is just a law. Every decision being made suppresses knowledge. I'm not saying that's bad, but you need to be aware of it. What am I suppressing? And you need to watch what's happening in the group here, right? When I'm doing an event storming session with people, and people are taking decisions, I'm going to start watching that sabotage line, right? The first sarcastic jokes pop up. So I need to intervene then, right? Because I'm lacking knowledge. Proper software design, you want to have all the information on the table. And what happens usually in a group is what's happened in this group. Can anyone tell me what's weird? There's two weird things, by the way. One, this on one paw, but probably you see this one. So I didn't make this story up. This is from Jitske Kramer and Danielle Brown. They call the bird Harry. There's a reason. They were explaining this concept to a group. And then someone mentioned, that's Harry. Weird, Harry was in the room. But it was Harry. But Harry sees it different. But people find Harry a bit weird, right? So who is maybe sometimes the Harry here? Who knows a Harry in a group, right? They always do it differently, yeah. But what is with Harry is that if you don't hear the music and you see people dancing, that's pretty weird. Ever been to a silent disco? Yeah, weird, right? But you don't hear the music. And that's that's the thing with Harry, right? Harry knows things you don't know. So the first thing what we should do is, okay, Harry, can you explain me what you see? That in itself doesn't mean you should agree with it, right? There's a difference between understanding and agreement, right? I can understand a lot of things happening in this world, but it doesn't mean I agree with them. But it starts with understanding. So if you know you're higher in the rank, what can you do about it? Please share your rank. So what I usually do in these sessions when I get the question instead of Evelyn, say, oh, you mean, yeah, Evelyn is really expert at this. Let her do that. Sounds a bit condescending, yes, but it's better to share your rank. And by the way, I also own my rank, because I can go against that, but at least I have the rank, so I can share it as well. There's nothing so condescending as my manager or a boss runs up to someone, worker from, I don't know, and says, yeah, we're equal. Well, no, you control the flow of money, I don't. Yes, we should be like equal in a social sense, right? We should be the same and not being treated differently, but you actually have money. I don't control the money. So the first thing is own that up, right? Yes, I have it, and then share it. Okay, how can we spend this money? Yeah, so if you're in higher rank, please share. And you can play around, right? You can change your symbolic violence as well by just speaking up. So it works both ways. So start playing with your rank as well. If you think you're in lower rank, see if that's true. Usually it happens for a lot of people, unfortunately. But you also need to have people there sharing your rank. There's a lot of research about this, and people in higher ranking are the only one actually who can change the system together with the other person, right? So help, share, see where you can make a difference there. Okay, so then, ensuring flow in meetings, how can we create and include new insight? And again, I'm switching to Evelyn. As I said, she has a social science background in cognitive bias. She studied them. And who knows about cognitive bias? First question. Anyone written Thinking Fast and Slow? It's a great book. It deals with how your mind thinks. It's the model, right? So it doesn't have to be true, but the model is you have a system 1, which is fast, and you have a system 2, which is slow. System 1 takes fast decision based on heuristics. Well, Dutch word is heuristic, but on your biases, right? What worked for me in the past? That's your system 1. Your system 2 is more analytical. It will keep you going longer. You will think about it and then make a decision, right? You need them both, and everyone has them both. And what's the thing is, when we're going to do collaborative modeling together, a lot is happening in that social environment. So a lot of people jump in their system 1, yeah, because, well, that's what they do. But the system 1 doesn't necessarily help because there's a lot of these biases. Now, we are sitting in Pathé. Usually when we give training, we give Pathé as a nice fake domain, and we say, Corona hit, how are we going to do this, right? And then we turn into functional fixedness, what's it called? So what we always see happening is people always see chairs like this, like rows, and that holds us back on that point, right? Recognizable, the functional fixedness, getting stuck in what you already know. So we cannot get anything new. Now, one thing about a bias is you cannot battle a bias. You can only work around the bias. Yeah? So just being aware of a bias isn't enough. You actually need something to work around this bias. So what we do is we want to switch perceptions to the functional fixedness, right? Give the least amount of information if we're going to do refinements or if we're going to do that collaborative modeling. Because as soon as you fix yourself on a certain situation, that's already going, how they call it, towards each other. So a mental block against using something in a new way that is required to solve a problem, what we know hinders us to take on new perspectives. And Harry here is really interesting, because Harry usually have the different perception, right? So trust in your Harry, I always say, or trust your inner Harry. So that's functional fixedness, right? That's the first thing that usually people are like, yeah, we all have seen this, it works like this, but well, they actually really made a nice thing here, right? Nobody thought of that. Now the second thing is the anchoring effect. Who knows the anchoring effect? Yeah, so the anchoring effect is, and you see it in how they did it in Scrum, right? With pokering, then everyone needs to place their number first and then show it. That's to battle this anchoring effect. Because if someone has in its mind, for instance, 13, but I will start and I say it's 3, then that person that says 13 is going to start doubting, and they will say, okay, no, it's 5. That's not what we want. That's why what we do with event storming is asking everyone for themselves to write down events, just to battle a bit of this anchoring effect, right? So the first one, and usually it's the one with highest ranking, will just walk up and he says, yeah, I think it takes 2 months. Okay, and someone thought 6 months. Okay, yeah, I think 2.5 months then. That's the follow-up, right? Anchoring effect. So how can you battle that? This is why stickies are so effective. So let people anonymously first put their thoughts out and then share it, like in that pokering. By the way, I'm not such a big fan of estimation, but it's a good example. Yeah? So, and then the last one is the false consensus effect. This happens a lot when we're taking a decision. We're thinking, everyone is on board on the decision, right? And this is the best model. Yeah. Who thinks their model is always the best? It's usually not the case. I do a lot of workshops, and yesterday I gave one for JFAL, and someone came up with a completely different model, and my first reaction was, nah, that's not how you... And then I start looking at it, and that's actually a very good idea, and what can I learn from this? But my false consensus effect, because I know the training, and I know a bit of where you could go and what the outcomes are, is giving me that false consensus effect. And I'm already neglecting a different model. And models are all wrong, George Box, right? All models are wrong because they're abstractions. So don't think yours is the best. Try to stay open and try to not come straightforward, no, this is wrong. So always check your assumption that. That's what I needed to do yesterday as a trainer, right? I was like, no, this cannot work, and oh, yeah, actually it can, and it's a very good idea. So how can we create and include new insights? It's, well, embrace the hurry. And a very, 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 very nice one we always do is model it wrong. So we ask people, what don't we want it to do? So when we're taking the approach of the cinema, and we say, okay, how do people sit? Model it wrong. Well, maybe we just show people their seats. That's maybe not what you wanted. But then we can say, well, maybe you can fix it. So if you model something wrong, what can we actually learn from that situation? Because there's always something to learn when you model it wrong, because you're getting into that false consensus effect again. Yeah? So how can we include new insight is model it wrong. So drop your anchor consciously. We're doing anchoring a lot. Leave room for individual contribution. Identify and check assumptions. And consider the possibility that your model is not the best. Well, don't consider it, actually know that your model is not the best. I always think my model is wrong. Well, except yesterday again in that few seconds, right? Always happens. So who decides on the architecture and how to get everyone on board with the decision? This is the question I get a lot, right? We stuff a lot of people in a room, but now we actually need to decide, right? It's a hard one. So at some point you generated all these different insights and two solutions come up. Yeah, so who's for the under? Yes. Who's the over? Yeah, this usually happens. I also have another friend who doesn't care. Yeah, Gien. Gien doesn't care, if you know her. You can, you know her, right? Gien Verschatse. No, she doesn't care, and we're like monster. But I'm actually here. You know why? I have a cat. Yeah. So my wife doesn't actually like that. She's more on this side. So we do it. Yeah. So, but you need to pick. So now who's gonna decide, right? That's the. And the thing here again, if you're talking about insights and you're talking about two competing solutions, which they are, right? You need to pick one. Then what we're getting into is a one versus the other. And the thing about one versus the other, if you propose solutions too soon, is that you cannot see the other one again. Who sees a rabbit? Now try to see the duck. Can you still see the rabbit? But you need to change your perspective, right? And with this one, it's very simple. I can do it quickly. But I see blue and gold. Who sees something different than blue and gold? Exactly. So I cannot literally see some people say they see black, for instance. Yeah, I cannot see it. And this is what usually happens when we're talking about solutions, and now it gets hard, right? Now it's hard for me to see black, and I can be accurate that I see black, but I will never be complete, because that's always there too. There's also black. And that's the accuracy versus completeness. We always try to be complete first and then get accurate. If you propose solutions too soon, we're going to get to the accurateness, right? And that's the switch in mindset here, from going from a discussion, which is discussion, by the way, is system 1, usually, right? Convince, take stance, think against others, answers are central, while we want to mostly move to dialogues. And what I see a lot in the IT, and I still am that guy sometimes, so I like to be in discussion. Who likes to be in the discussion mode, by the way? Yes. But if we want to be complete, we need to postpone our judgment. The thing is, at some point you need to move. You need them both, by the way. Not saying discussion is bad. There's a correct place for it. But you need them both. Because you have these different perceptions, right? We already talked about the hurries. And everyone sees it different. But this is the thing, what happens in all organization groups, people, is that we try to not get into a conflict. But if we just rethink our concept of what a conflict is, if I already see different than you, for me that's already a conflict. And peace is not the absence of conflict. Conflict are the status quo. There's always conflict. So maybe we just switch perception and saying there's always conflict. Ah, nice. So we get new insights and new perception. Right. Let's dive into that conflict. Right? Because if we want to create proper architecture or proper design or work better, we must be able to identify all the parts in the system, even the ones you don't want to hear. This is an important one. And again, the difference between understanding something, even though you don't accept it, first understand it. Then make your judgment if it's okay or not. But at least let it be there. Things can coexist. Things can be plural. It's okay, but how do we accommodate for the other? That's the question in the end. And what we usually do is we tend to not invite people because they are annoying or they see it different. But I like to invite these people who, especially the annoying ones with annoying perceptions who sees it different, because I can learn a lot from them. Do you need to do this always? No, there's a balance, but especially with this big first part of your design, invite these perceptions. And have meetings at campfire. If you want to lower conflicts, increase understanding. Don't let it be a boring meeting. Have a sort of more campfire meeting. Now Gitte has this really interesting things he does in the workshop. And just stare into each other's eyes for 2 minutes. And they did this, they researched this. There were people who are on completely opposite side of each other. And within that 2 minutes, they start to understand each other better by not saying anything, just looking in each other's eyes. So every time you're in a conflict, even though you get a lot of judgments, I still have that, it's totally human, but see if you can meet personally first. And that's that campfire. What we always do is we start with a check-in. And it's a deep democratic check-in, and we always check what are your perception? In a monologue, by the way. So if I give training, I ask, okay, who are you? Tell me something important or what you think is important about you. Why you want to be here, and why don't you want to be here? That's important. So usually in trainings, maybe someone has on his mind, I don't want to be here because I have a sick child at home. Now, if you don't get that up, that person you can be judgmental to. I had it once with a person I was working with, and he was standing in the back of the room like this all the time. And I was like, what is this guy's problem? We're giving a workshop. And then I found out his tooth needed to be cut out of his mouth because it was infected. Ooh, if we knew that, then I wouldn't have that judgment, and it got hold me. That's why the check-in, I tried to get this out, and that has something to do with group conscious and group unconsciousness, right? So the group consciousness is everything we know. But unconsciously, I didn't know there was pain in his tooth. So first I need to meet him as a person and her and everyone in the group. And then we want to lower the waterline, because the true wisdom and potential is at the bottom. People don't speak up sometimes, but the true wisdom and potential of a group is in the bottom. So we try to lower that waterline with these check-ins, with these sense-makings, with these things. And deep democracy I really like, because deep democracy tries to neutralize the playing field, as we say, that everyone can be involved. Now, one thing I don't like to do is put people on the spot, right? Because you instantly make it unsafe for that person. So I never do a round. I never say, can you say something, can you say something? Because then I don't like that in a collaborative discussion. I always let the group decide if they want to share or not. If they don't, fine. If I force them to speak up, they will probably say the wrong thing anyway. It is what it is. So it's my job as a facilitator to make it safe to say what has to be said. And not everyone should speak up. If someone says something I agree to, then I don't need to say the same thing, because it's already said. Fine, it's already said, right? And what we try to do within that deep democracy is I try to gain all views. I try to make it safe to say alternative views. So what I usually do is someone says something, and then I actively, okay, who thinks roughly the same? And then I want to see hands. And this way I'm trying to spread that around, and people feel, oh, other people also feel like that. And then I ask, who sees it differently? Very important to get all the views out, right? Spread the why. And then the most important thing is, at some point, we take a decision. Either I take a decision, I'm going to get to that, or someone takes a decision, or it's a majority vote, right? And you have 10 people who said, yeah, I want this solution, and 2 people who don't. Usually that's a wrap. Okay, we're going to get to work, right? Who's seen this? So right, the majority wins. Who ever seen that? Yeah, and we never ask the 4th question. What will it take for you to go along? What do you need? We're gonna go that way, but how can I accommodate for your needs given this situation? So for instance, a very easy example, I wanted to have 45 minutes lunch, and the group decided for 30 minutes. So I said, well, it's been a really tiresome day, maybe later on we can have another break. And then you vote again, and see, does everyone agree? Yeah. So I adding new perspectives to the vote. And when you leave, everyone, at least, could say what they needed to say. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, by the way, if you're in conflict now and people are on the right side of the sabotage line. It doesn't just change just by doing this today. It needs time, by the way. Not everyone feels safe instantly. You cannot just say, well, it's a safe place here. Yeah, doesn't work that way. Yeah, exactly. So don't do that. And one thing, if you have over 8 or 10 people, it's getting harder and harder to take a group decision. So sometimes you still need to make that decision from a group for the rest of the teams, right? So usually what I do as a software architect, I bring people together from the teams and we make a decision, and then the other teams just need to agree with that. So yes, there's 4 or 5 people from the teams. I'm a software architect. I usually don't take the decision. I don't like to take a decision. I let the teams take the decision. I facilitate the decision and I make sure there's a decision being made. So sometimes when I know there's a business risk, I just put people together and say, today, in the next 2 hours, we're going to take a decision on this. And we're not leaving until we make that decision. But I'm not going to make it. But maybe sometimes in a situation you need to. So there's a few things you can do when you move into a situation to make a decision. I can start with an idea. I said, well, you have an idea, but nothing is certain. So this is my idea, but what do you think? Right? Everything is open. Second one is, well, I have a suggestion. I think we should go that way, right? But that's already a solution. Then there's a third one, which is the proposal. I propose this, and if there's nothing against that proposal, nothing really bad, no real risk, then we're just going to do it. And I always ask the question, what do you need to go along? And then the last one is command, right? Decision is made, what does it take for you to go along? Now, what usually goes wrong here is that people already made up their mind, they already have a proposal or a command, but they act like it's an idea. Who's ever been in that situation? Yeah, if you took a decision because you're higher in ranking, which is fine, just say, this is what we're going to do, and what do you need to go along with it? Fine. I can understand why you do it, let's move along. But don't say, everything is open. Make that command. It's fine. Sometimes it's fine. Just people want to say what they want to say. They can just move along. It's, by the way, I like it sometimes, a lot of times when other people make decisions for me. I can just go back to work. It's fine, right? Are you not missing a problem? Well, it's you have a problem, and the first thing you can do is idea. Sometimes you don't even sure if you have a problem. No, but then it's in the idea, right? It's open, and we can do everything. But how much space? It's more about the space that you give, right? You can give like everything is open, or you can say like nope, and that's just a gap, and it doesn't have to be a problem. It can also be something else. But really be clear on what the playing field is, what the boundaries are for someone to take a decision in. Yeah. So, who decides on the architecture, how to get everyone on board, who to invite? I use the Deep Democracy Lewis method. Now, don't start implementing it like they said it on the website. Make it your own. First, start with, okay, who sees it different, or who relates a bit to it. Right? Start with that. Now, and then how to deal with issues that keep cycling back. And I see I have 5 minutes to go, so I'm The first thing is there's a paradox, right? Plan, but take action, right? And that's a paradox. There's two sides of the same coin. So what we want is we don't only want to do planning, we don't only want to do action, they both have negative sides, and that's what we call polarity. And a polarity map is really nice. You map the positive effects, you map the negative effects of that polarity. So planning versus action, right? When do we actually design? Design is planning, and when do we actually code, right? That's usually the situation people are in. Well, then see what's the good side of one, what's the bad side of one, what are the observations I make in my context? And here is an example, right? So individual versus team is a polarity. So I like ensemble programming, right, which is a team thing, but I also like to just individual code. And that's both fine. I just need to know that if I have no new insights as a team or learning gate from a session, then I just might go to the individual side, right? Divide user stories or refine my speak. But only a single person can pick up a specific user story. For me, that's a signal that we need to do more together, right? It's a balance that you need to keep head to. So, ensuring flows in meetings, create awareness of people that ranks in the group, own, play, and share your rank, be aware and make explicit the biases at play, work around them, use deep democracy, the Lewis method for your decision making, and start managing polarities with the group by using polarity mapping. And this is the thing, if you just start with one of these things, if you just start with ranking, it's already going to get a lot better. Thank you. And leave the judging to the cats, is what we always say. The left one is mine, the right one is Evelyn. She'll be happy if you make a photo that her cat is online again. She'll love it. So, thank you very much.